biological life must be exterminated. The soul's fire extinguished.
Agreed. But how?
With violence.
There is another way. Allow me to show you.
Fighting games have a special place in my heart. In fact, I think it is my favorite video game genre. Growing up with video games in the early 90s meant that you were quite familiar with fighting games at your local arcade. Everything from Street Fighter to Mortal Kombat to Killer Instinct, fighting games were everywhere at the time, and new ones were popping up every 2 seconds. Once Capcom finished releasing a million different versions of Street Fighter 2, they really started perfecting their craft as the kings of the fighting game industry and started dabbling with other properties. Like most people my age, when I was a kid, one of my favorite shows to watch was the X-Men animated series on Fox Kids. And it blew my mind whenever Capcom released an X-Men fighting game in 1994. X-Men Children of the Atom. I specifically remember being on vacation with my parents one summer in Puerto Rico when I first encountered this game. Back then, without internet, it was common to find out about new games by just going to the arcade and seeing them there. We went to the mall to this awesome little arcade that was in there called Time Out, and I remember laying my eyes on the X-Men Children of the Atom arcade for the first time, and I was just like, holy shit, the Street Fighter people made an X-Men fighting game. It was a dream come true. Children of the Atom was awesome, setting the foundation for how Marvel characters would play and look like in Capcom fighting games. Then things got crazy. All the crossovers started happening, and who doesn't like a good crossover, honestly? X-Men vs. Street Fighter came out, 2 sets of characters from 2 completely unrelated universes, but somehow they meshed together perfectly. Then the Marvel side expanded beyond just X-Men characters in Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. And then the Capcom side expanded beyond just Street Fighter characters in Marvel vs. Capcom, resulting in a new crossover series that over the years has gathered a dedicated fan base. The latest game in the Marvel vs. Capcom series, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, introduces a full-blown story mode for the first time in the history of the franchise. So we're going to focus a major portion of this review on the story mode, spoilers and all. The fighting game community tends to ignore story modes and jump right into online multiplayer, which is such a shame to me because I've always loved following the journeys of different characters in fighting games. I'm all about story, and fighting games generally do have an overall plot woven throughout the experience. But story modes in fighting games have changed drastically in recent years when 2011's Mortal Kombat reboot took the genre by storm and said, this is how you do a story mode in a fighting game. They introduced a detailed plot with cutscenes and outstanding storytelling, mixed in with regular battles that you would expect, and forced you to play as several different characters throughout the game's chapters that you might not normally choose if you had the choice. The same thing was also done with Injustice, pitting the heroes of DC Comics against a Superman gone bad. Mortal Kombat and Injustice are at the top of fighting game story modes, and the prime example of how to do it right. Soul Calibur 5 being the worst, most embarrassing example of how to do it completely wrong. So how do you do the same thing successfully with Marvel vs. Capcom? A series that has combined 2 different universes, 2 very different universes, without ever really explaining how in any great detail. Well, luckily, the world of Marvel Comics has the greatest storytelling device available when it comes to doing crazy reality-bending shit. The Infinity Gems. Yes, I know they refer to them in the game as Infinity Stones, but that's just because the movies do it. I'm an old school comic book fan, so we've always called them the Infinity Gems, and I will continue doing so for this review. And this isn't the first time Capcom has used the gems in their fighting games. They also served before as power-ups in the original games, giving different abilities based on which gem was used. And the same thing happens in Infinite, with different gems having different attacks ready to use. Story-wise, the Infinity Gems are front and center. Jedha from Capcom's Darkstalker series travels from the Capcom universe to the Marvel universe, obsessed with a plot to combine both universes into one, in an effort to create some kind of balance between life and death. So he convinces the personification of death in the Marvel universe to help him. And the only thing that can do something like this on such a cosmic scale are the Infinity Gems. and nobody is more obsessed with tracking down the Infinity Gems than Thanos. So Death manipulates Thanos to help her recreate the universe, not realizing that she was working behind the scenes with Jeddah and simply using him for her own purposes.
I tire of this universe. I wish for it to change.
If it pleases you.
I loved this aspect of the plot because it really highlights the Darkstalkers series. I always felt like Darkstalkers is the forgotten and often ignored Capcom fighting series, full of different monster archetypes fighting each other. So it's great seeing Capcom give some love to Darkstalkers, especially when they've made 5,000 Street Fighter sequels and versions, and Darkstalkers has remained relatively quiet since the PS1 era. So Death gives Thanos the Space Gem, and this is where the story starts getting completely crazy, and gets filled with fan service. Using the Space Gem, they see that the Reality Gem is concealed behind some kind of technological barrier in a futuristic city. The one being that can manipulate technology and get behind this barrier, Ultron, of course. So Thanos goes and grabs Ultron, tempting him the promise of taking all the technology in the city for himself. So the Space Stone teleports them both to the city. What city is this? Able City. If you don't know what Able City is, that very first level in the very first Mega Man X game, that's Able City. Ultron and Thanos are hanging out in the world of Mega Man X. Awesome. During their search for the Reality Gem, Ultron meets Sigma, the big bad of the Mega Man X series, basically the equivalent of Ultron in the Mega Man universe. Watching these two meet for the first time was so well done. These two evil beings, both robotic and determined to wipe out all organic life, are just standing there bewildered by the other and admiring each other. So of course, they decide to secretly work together, knocking out Thanos and stealing the Reality Stone, fusing into a single insanely powerful being that calls itself Ultron Sigma. This is the craziest story I've ever seen in a video game, and being a huge fan of both the Mega Man X universe and the Marvel universe, I got chills seeing Ultron and Sigma working together. But that's nothing. The story gets even crazier from here, as the Capcom and Marvel heroes have to work together to stop Ultron Sigma in this new world. Using the two Infinity Gems in his possession, Ultron Sigma fuses both universes together, literally, resulting in some of the most creative stages I've seen in a fighting game. Avengers Tower is no longer located in New York City. New York now has fused with Metro City from Final Fight into a new city called New Metro City, where Mike Hagar is the mayor, and there's Easter eggs sprawled through the streets referencing the Mad Gear Gang from Final Fight. AIM, the evil organization from Marvel Comics that has had plenty of run-ins with Iron Man, fused with Resident Evil's Umbrella Corporation into a new company called AIMbrella that's experimenting with bioweapons right out of the Umbrella Corporation and fusing them with symbiotes to create mindless troops. And MODOK, the giant-headed Iron Man villain, is also the leader of AIMbrella and has Resident Evil 3's Nemesis under his command.
Stars.
Nemesis.
The Makai realm from Darkstalkers fused with the Dark Dimension, home of one of Doctor Strange's most dangerous enemies, Dormammu, into a new realm called the Dark Kingdom, where Jeddah is sacrificing a ton of lives to feed an enormous symbiote that he brings to life and uses it to terrorize New Metro City. Nowhere, the decapitated head of an ancient celestial being, and base of operations of the Guardians of the Galaxy, fused with the space station from Capcom's Strider universe, the Third Moon, into a new space station called No Moon, where Gamora and Strider have to face off against Strider's nemesis, Grandmaster Mio.
You have my thanks.
Valhabar, the village from Capcom's Monster Hunter, fused with Wakanda, the African nation ruled by Black Panther, to become Valkanda, a new kingdom where Black Panther remains king and monster hunters protect the city from surrounding creatures. Enable City from Mega Man X fused with Asgard, home of Thor and the Asgardians, to become Xgard, Ultron Sigma's seat of power. The combination of both universes creating levels, which are essentially fusions of places from both universes, is just awesome, and I loved being introduced to each new area as the story progressed. Most of the enemies you fight during the story happen to be Ultron robots, symbiote bioweapons, or brainwashed allies, with a boss battle against one of the main villains thrown in every once in a while. And the way Ultron has been brainwashing allies is actually pretty creative. In the Mega Man X universe, Sigma infects other robots using a virus called the Sigma virus, which reprograms them to turn against mankind, essentially building an army of followers. Well, Ultron Sigma has figured out how to use the Sigma virus to infect living beings, so he took control of all of the Asgardians.
My people. What has become of them?
Thor.
Throughout the story mode, all of the heroes are forced to work together with Thanos to track down the other Infinity Gems to keep Ultron Sigma from gathering them all.
Thanos, the Mad Titan. Cosmic warlord / lunatic.
And you want to give him access to these stones? There must be some other way.
We're out of options and out of time. Take off the mask.
I'm sorry, Cap. I can't let you do it.
All these characters that shouldn't know anything about each other all act like they've known each other for years, and for some reason, it feels like they all do belong together. Their interactions during the cutscenes are always entertaining.
Yo, Dante. Out of ammo. Can the ladies come out to play?
For you, Rocket, anything. Be good.
Ebony, Ivory, care to dance?
Iron Man and Dante are the two cocky members of the team, so they get along perfectly.
If you fail,
It's an awesome responsibility.
Hey, we're awesome guys. Yeah.
Nice.
My God, we're doomed.
Thor and Arthur are both warriors that fight monsters regularly, so they form a friendship of their own.
Sir Arthur! Not bad for one so small.
And you, Thor, are indeed mighty for a heathen god.
Rocket runs his mouth constantly and loves tinkering with technology, so he just harasses Mega Man X.
So, do you take, like, regular batteries? Looks like it could really do some damage. What's the biggest thing you ever killed with that bad boy, huh?
Rocket, are you listening?
And Ryu and Hulk both have a power inside that takes complete control of them, turning them into raging forces of destruction. So Ryu's been helping Hulk control his anger.
Hulk, remember what I taught you. You must control your rage.
So much attention to detail was put into this story to make all these characters work together. And the final battle with Ultron Sigma is something right out of Mega Man X. In those games, Sigma always has this final transformation that turns him into some kind of huge monstrous form. And in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, this is no different. Sigma and Ultron become half unfused, with a giant Sigma head on the bottom, with the top half of Ultron connected on the top, and call themselves Ultron Omega. But the way Ultron Omega is destroyed is the most outstanding thing I've ever seen. It sounds like something right out of some awesome fanfiction. In Marvel Comics, the only object that can contain and control the power of the Infinity Gems is the Infinity Gauntlet. In this story, Iron Man, with the help of the hologram of Dr. Light, who created Mega Man originally, builds an Infinity Buster for Mega Man X, which holds the Infinity Gems and gathers all their combined power to shoot a huge blast right through his arm cannon.
Perfect. I call this baby the Infinity Buster. Let it rip, kid.
That is so badass. So overall, the story in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was extremely well done. I only had one real gripe with it. The storyline involving Thanos never really got a satisfying conclusion. Throughout the story, Thanos works to steal a device from Able City that can absorb the powers of other beings. So he takes this gauntlet and absorbs the Satsui no Hado from Ryu. That's that inner power Ryu has that turns him into evil Ryu when he loses control of himself. Thanos absorbs the Satsui no Hado, then goes off to get revenge against Death. But we never see the conclusion to this, and that entire side plot just felt rather thrown in just to give Thanos something to do. Aside from the story, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite does some other things extremely well that newer fighting games tend to ignore plenty of times. There's tons of artwork to look at, there's character bios to read through, there's music from the game that you can play and listen to. These are those little things that add value to the overall experience. Every fighting game with a bunch of different characters should have some kind of museum mode like this. But while I did enjoy this game overall, and the 4 to 5 hour experience I had with it was a blast, there are some glaring things I wasn't happy with that kept me from seeing it as a truly great fighting game and forced me to be immediately disappointed. Let's start off with the roster of characters. It's completely unimpressive. This is the second smallest roster in Marvel vs. Capcom history, right behind the very first game. And we're talking before DLC or any Ultimate Editions. As the game shipped, why is the roster smaller than previous games? Marvel vs. Capcom 2 had an impressive selection of 56 fighters, and even the standard version of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had a decent amount of 36 fighters. Infinite cut it down to even less, sporting a total of only 30 as of the release date. Normally, no, that wouldn't be such a huge deal because 30 really isn't an awful number, but it is when most of the roster are just recycled characters from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Of course, there are a couple of new and welcome additions like Ultron, Captain Marvel, and the highly demanded Mega Man X, but there's just not enough new characters here to really get me excited about the selection. Another pet peeve I have is when movie adaptations start influencing everything else, and the Marvel roster is so heavily inspired by the Marvel Cinematic Universe that it couldn't be more obvious. What about lesser known characters that never get any love, like Moon Knight? And another huge crime. Where are all the X-Men characters? Oh, wait a minute. The producer of the game says that fans don't remember the X-Men? What a slap in the face to their legacy. The X-Men are one of the most beloved comic book characters of all time, with decades of amazing stories. And Wolverine was one of my personal favorite fighters in the Capcom games. Even if we get some really cool DLC release later, it's still no reason to celebrate. They should have had these characters in there right from the get-go, not just some afterthought to be sold to you later. But the biggest letdown I had in this game is where they really dropped the ball. And mind you, if all you care about is online multiplayer, this isn't going to bother you at all. But for us fighting game fans that do enjoy a single player mode, it's pretty bad. There are no character endings in this game. None. You can play through the entire arcade mode, fight Ultron Omega in the end, and get slapped with the credits and a thank you for playing message. Oh wait, you can unlock some additional colors too, because anyone really gives a shit about that. Wiping out character endings erases any motivation for me to go through the arcade mode repeatedly, trying to unlock all the character endings, severely limiting the replayability. This is virtually the exact reason I hate Soul Calibur 5 so much, and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite does the exact same thing. Luckily, they had an outstanding story mode, but after I beat the story mode, I kind of thought to myself, well, now what? I mean, there's a throwaway mission mode that does nothing to entertain you. An arcade mode was such a missed opportunity. That unresolved storyline I mentioned before involving Thanos, they could have easily had him as the final villain of the arcade mode, taking place after the main story, with character endings, and treated the arcade mode almost like a sequel or a side story to the story mode's main plot. So I'm not going to go as far as saying that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is a bad game. Quite far from it. It's really good. The mechanics are perfect, the online multiplayer is stable, and the story is satisfying, but for those of us that do like that single player portion of a fighting game, there's just not a whole lot to offer outside of 4 or 5 hours of gameplay. It's just kind of empty overall. Mortal Kombat and Injustice still stand strong as the pinnacle of fighting games. But I hope you all enjoyed this review. If you did, leave me a like down below and a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't done so already, remember to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. This is Fabian. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.